Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good morning, good morning, good morning. And welcome to Daring Dialogues. We're going to give just a moment for my family to come on because I'm going to be clowning this morning. Y'all already know I'm on 10. I'm going to be clowning this morning. Ooh, good morning. I can just imagine, Lord, 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 all of the church mothers in Alabama on Sunday morning. On Sunday morning. On Sunday morning. Y'all know I'm finna clown, right? I'm gonna clown today. I can imagine the church mothers on Sunday morning walking in the church and singing, yes, God is real. Yes, God is real. Yes, God is real. Ooh, yes, God is real. Yes, God is real. Oh, put some hearts on the screen if you know that God is real. Yeah. Yes, for God is real. Yes, I can feel him in my soul. Yes, and if you're not a church mother and you live in the state of Alabama, I got a song for you this morning. I woke up singing this song and I was like, I think that's a catchy song. I'm going to sing it today. So if you are a voter in Alabama, this song is for you. Well, they told me that the vote of black people didn't matter. Reclaiming my vote. Reclaiming my vote. Reclaiming my vote. Reclaiming my vote. Well, they told me that the vote of black people didn't matter. Reclaiming my vote. Reclaiming my vote. Ready for the choir? Reclaiming my vote. Isn't that a good song? Awesome song, ain't it? The Lord gave that to me this morning when I got up. Oh my goodness. I could just picture Ricky Dillard having a great time with reclaiming my vote. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Daring Dialogues. I am your host, Shantae Charles. I promise you, I don't start off every broadcast singing, but those two songs have been in my spirit since this morning, and I have been praising and jamming out. So, I want to talk this morning. We're going to talk about relationships, and this also ties into relationships, all right? We're going to talk a little bit about the results of the Alabama Senate race that happened on yesterday, all right? I find it very ironic that last week I picked up this printed tee from my local Family Dollar, okay? And I was like, oh yeah, I have been sassy since birth. That sounds about right. So y'all know I like printed tees, and I just picked it up. You know, it wasn't very expensive. And I was like, you know, maybe I'll get around to wearing it this week. Little did I know, Senate candidate Roy Moore rode in to the election yesterday to vote. He rode in on his horse named Sassy to cast his vote. And as I saw that image of him riding in on his horse, Sassy, I was like, wow, how ironic that I have this shirt that literally has the name of the horse that he rode in on to cast his vote. And as I said on my Daring Dialogues page, if you're on Facebook, you can like the page. God woke me back up this morning at 2 o'clock this morning to talk to me about this election. And one of the things that he pointed out was he rode in on a horse to cast a vote in 2017. He rode in like it was 1917. He rode in an outdated or outmoded way of getting around. People generally don't ride into town on a horse, right? He rode into the election like it was 1917 instead of 2017. And he was expecting the year 1917 results, but he didn't get it. And why didn't he get it? In spite of his so-called family values platform, okay? In spite of him going to a black church and reading a Christmas poem and hoping that the black people would vote for him, in spite of getting white female conservative voters to do a press conference for him, of the which I know some of the women personally that were a part of that press conference, in spite of him getting a 12-year-old girl or 13-year-old girl to interview him, okay, in spite of all of that, the people chose Doug Jones over Roy Moore. And so my question was, why did they choose Doug Jones over Roy Moore? And the reality was that his character and his questionable things in his background outweighed the optics that he was trying to put forth. All right? He was trying to put forth optics that said, I'm a family man, I'm not a pedophile, I like black people, I'm for women, etc. But there was too much kind of cloudiness, right, around his character. And the fact that some of the things that that he was accused of doing, he didn't really deny it. He really just kind of put it out there as it being 30 years ago or it being back in the day. But remember, we didn't give Bill Cosby the benefit of the doubt when he said the stuff I did was 30, 40, 50 years ago. People automatically said, guilty, guilty, right? And they started pulling him off of networks and pulling him off of programs, and he had to go to court and go to trial and all of that. Bill Cosby was not given no benefit of the doubt, right? And his things happened 30 years ago, the things that he was accused of. So the reality was all of the suspicion, all of the underlying things outweighed the optics that he was trying to present. All right. And here's the thing. This is what I want to say to all of you who are registered voters. All right. Many people now are talking about what the Democratic Party can do for 2018. They're talking about what the Republican Party can do for 2018. Here's what my opinion, okay? Here's what I believe voters can do. How about we go independent and make everybody work for our vote? All right? Somebody else just came up on my screen now. They're about to talk about the same thing. Black votes matter. How about we all go independent and make people work for your vote and fight for the policies that benefit your community? Because the reality is, though Doug Jones got elected, he didn't get elected by promising to do anything for the main people who helped to bring him over. And that was the black community. So now people are saying, well, we got to hold his feet to the fire. But how can you hold his feet to the fire when he now knows that you will vote for him as opposed to letting the greater evil, so to speak, come into office? All right. So that's going to be an uphill road in some ways for Alabama voters, black voters especially, because he really got in by not necessarily promising anything. He did get more involved. He did do door-to-door work. He did show up. He did go on black radio stations and those kinds of things. But beyond that, All right. Remember, the Democratic Party this past year was called out for their platform of what we call benign neglect, which is don't promise black people anything. Remember that? There was a report that came out that talked about what was being said inwardly through communication to meet with black people, to listen to them, but don't necessarily promise them anything. All right. And so because we know that is the modus operandi of the Democratic Party, you have to be careful about putting all your hope into a particular, political party. All right. So my encouragement is to you is make sure that you are voting for people who will fight for policies that will actually benefit your community and not harm your community. Very interesting to note with this election that Selma, Alabama, actually pushed Doug Jones over the margin. Right now, the calculation says that he won within 1.5% of a margin between him and the candidate Roy Moore. Roy Moore wants to call for a recount, but many are saying because it's over more than 0.5%, he may not get his wish for a recount. So we will see as the day goes on how that plays out. Now, as a card-carrying member, longtime member of the Republican Party, let me say this to you, because you know I got to deal with everybody, right? Let me say this to you, all my Republican watchers, all right? And I can talk about you because I was in it 20 years, so I can talk about you. And I'm going to talk about you this morning. Here's what you don't do, Republicans, all right? I've met some of you. Some of you seem very nice. You seem very kind. You seem very sincere. But here's what you don't do most of the time. You don't listen to black people. That's number one. You don't listen to most of the black people in your party. That's 1A. All right. You don't listen to women. I have seen it, so you can't tell me it's not true. All right. You don't listen to women. You especially don't listen to women who are trying to tell you something that's contrary to the platform and program that you already have worked out. You especially have a hard time listening to black women unless they are spouting off your talking points for your party. You don't really want to hear a new idea. You want to hear your idea repeated and regurgitated. You don't really listen to people under 40. 40 and under. This is why your party is men, white males, usually 65 and older, with one particular standard or mindset. All right? So I'm telling you that as somebody who has been in your party for 20 years and I've seen what you all do. You also do participate in voter suppression. How do I know? Because my vote was personally suppressed. Yes. I went to the voting polls, all right, in, 2012. I went to the voting poll, my local voting poll. I showed my ID. I said I'm here to register to vote in this new state that I moved to, Virginia. All right. And the people at the polling station took one look at me as a black woman and assumed, with a D on the end, that I was a Democrat. Surprise! I was not a Democrat, but you all suppressed my vote. Let me tell you how you suppressed my vote. All right? How did you suppress my vote? You told me that I could not register, and then I got a letter in the mail, a letter for me to appear before a court, a judge, to prove that I actually lived in the county. That's what you did to me. And I was a Republican. So I know that if you did that to me, I know you going around other places suppressing the vote. So you can't lie to me. Hello? All right? So we have evidence of that. In case anybody in the RNC wants to know, we can provide the evidence, okay? It's on record that they asked us to appear before a judge in order to prove that we live where we lived, and the process would have taken more time, and so we would have missed the opportunity to vote. So we had to cast absentee ballots. But I'm just telling you that I know you're practicing voter suppression tactics because you did it to me. Can I just give you a little advice? Stop. Stop. STAWP. Stop it. Okay? That's not how you win people. That's not how you win people. Republicans, that's not how you win people. All right? Let me talk about the stats of this particular election. The stats on this election. For Doug Jones, 30% of whites voted for Doug Jones, which means without the votes of blacks, primarily, Doug Jones would not have won. He got 90% of the black vote. All right? So for those of you all who missed my song, go back and catch the replay, because I got a song for that. It's called Reclaiming My Vote. Because they told us that the votes of black people don't matter. But in local elections, they especially matter, okay? So he got 96% of the black vote, all right? Roy Moore got 68% of the white vote and only 4% of the black vote. Now, I want to go check on those 4% of black people and understand why they voted against their own interests for someone with a questionable background. I need to find them, those 4%. Okay. All right. Here are other stats. For Doug Jones, 57% of women voted for him. For Roy Moore, 41%. For Jones, they said about 96% black voted. For Moore, it was 4%. For the young, okay, 60% of young people voted for Doug Jones because they do not want to go back to the plantation. They do not want to go back to 1917, 1817, 1717, or 1617. 38% voted for Moore. So I need to find those 38% of young people and figure out why in the world would you want to vote for someone who said, all right, that the Constitution basically would have been better off had they stopped at the 10th Amendment. That means Amendments 13th, 14th, and 15th, which included black people, all right, and the amendment for women to vote. He's saying that, hey, it would have just been better off had they stopped at the 10th Amendment, all right? So if you can't read between the lines on that, I don't know what to tell you. All right? By party, here are the stats. For Jones, 8% of Republicans voted for him. All right? For Moore, 91% of Republicans voted for him. So had he had full Republican participation, he might have skimmed by. For Jones, 98% of Democrats voted for him. For Moore, 2% of Democrats voted for him. But here's what people are not paying attention to. For Doug Jones, 51% of the independents voted for Doug Jones. So independents also made a difference in this election. For Roy Moore, 43% of independents voted for him. And then, of course, there's the demographic breakdown that everybody is talking about, and that is the 65% of white women who voted for Roy Moore and the 74% of white men who voted for Roy Moore. And people are questioning, what is it about the white women in our country that is continually causing them to vote for someone who clearly dislikes women? And I'm not talking about women in leadership. I'm talking about the treatment of women. I'm talking about behavior towards women. I'm talking about not even acknowledging his part that he might have played in ruining women's lives when they were in their early teens. People are asking the question, what is going on in the psyche of white women that they keep choosing men that are not necessarily in their best interest? Okay? So that's a question that people are trying to answer. There was one article put out, I forget who it was by, I think it was by Vox, okay, that talked about the misogynistic culture that's in white culture that's not really talked about. In black culture, we see it. We see it through music. We see it through hip hop, this whole disrespect of women. Right? It's out in the open in black culture. People talk about it all the time. They talk about how black men are treating black women, how they see them as objects, etc., etc., etc. However, it's not just in our culture, people. It's not just in black culture. It may not be as visible as it is in black culture, but it's also in white culture as well. One of the things that you have to understand about white supremacist culture especially, okay, is Dr. Frances Cress Welsing detailed this in her book, The ISIS Papers. She talked about the fact that when you're dealing with men who are under the influence of white supremacy, that they believe that everything is supposed to come under their control, including their own women. All right? So if that is the mindset and the framework by which they're operating from, then you're gonna get a religious culture that says a woman's place is only as a wife and a mother. That's what you're gonna get. Okay? They are property. Exactly. So that mindset has been there for a while, but you're starting to see it in the decision making of the women. And here's the other piece that people don't want to admit to. Most of these people are voting their whiteness above everything else. They're voting whiteness above everything else. They're voting it above their economic status. They're voting it above their religious choice. They're voting it above their gender. Because for them, and people who think this way, at the end of the day, it is about preserving a culture and preserving power within the United States of America. It is about preserving control. Okay? Beyond their gender, it is about, is my culture going to survive and be in control of political movement, economic movement, etc. in this country? All right. So again, we talked about this before with the election. People voted their whiteness above all else. So last thing I want to say on this, and then we're going to move to our talk about relationships. I saw an article that came out right after the election from Christianity Today. And the author of the article talked about how this election was about morality. It was about people's divide, etc., etc., etc. And as I read through the entire article, this author, who was speaking as a Christian from a Christian perspective, not one time did he figure out that the greatest divide in this election was racial. Okay? And it was stark racially. It was stark. And not one time did this Christian writer talking about the issues at all mention racism as a moral issue. Okay? And here's the thing. How can I say this? It is 2017, and white believers have still not figured out that racism is a moral issue for black people, particularly black Christians. Okay? They haven't figured it out yet. They're saying the left has no morals. But how are you going to claim morality when you will not deal with America's original sin, which was enslaving people and causing them to be subservient to you because you said God told you to do that? And you said that God gave you the authority to enslave other people. and then you codified it in law based on their skin color, all in the name of God. So again, if we're going to talk about all the issues about why Roy Moore did not get elected, you can't say, well, black Christians are just not as moral as we are, when black Christians are looking at you like, listen, you all talk about abortion all day and how wrong it is. You talk about homosexuality and how wrong it is. But you don't talk about racism and how wrong that is. And why don't you talk about racism and how morally wrong it is unless you think that black people are either cursed, or you believe, according to your doctrines, that black people are ordained to be subservient. And therefore, if you're ordained to be subservient, then why should I elevate you? Because in my belief about what the Bible says, my belief says you're cursed and you're supposed to be serving us. All right? So if you believe that, you're never going to see that race is an issue. It's a moral issue. All right? So there were a lot of black Christians that voted for Doug Jones, even though Doug Jones is pro-abortion. But here's another thing. If we're going to talk pro-abortion, it's pro-abortion to destroy the lives of people who are already living. It's pro-abortion to abort the lives of the elderly because they can't afford health care and so they die. It's pro-abortion to abort the lives of vets who are still waiting on treatment. Okay? So you have to realize that your definition of abortion may just be in the womb, but everybody else is looking at how you're aborting lives that are already here. All right? So your argument about abortion does not make sense when you are not concerned about the people who are already living, whose lives are being cut short by your policies. Okay? So let's be clear. Both candidates were pro-abortion. All right? If you really want to be honest about the issues, both of them were pro-abortion in their own way. All right? Lastly, white Christians, until you deal with racial bigotry, you're going to see more elections flip in 2018. You're going to see more red turn back to blue in 2018 because the issue of racial bigotry is not important to you yet. All right? But when it becomes important to you and you begin to actually stand up and address it, then you might see some progress. But until then, until you understand that black Christians are not going to vote for a candidate who wishes that the amendments to the Constitution for them being free never existed, until you understand that black Christians are not going to vote for somebody who says that black families were better off during slavery, until you understand that black Christians are not going to vote for someone who has a questionable behavior with minors, until you understand that, we're going to see the same thing we saw happen in Alabama. You're going to see it across the country. And until you get some African American advisors who tell you the truth and not what you want to hear, you're going to see the same thing in 2018. All right? So I'm done. I think I'm done. However, I just want to remind voters. Somebody asked, are you Democrat? Are you Republican? Listen, I am for whoever is going to support my community with policies that are helping my community and that are not harming them. And there is nothing wrong with me choosing to vote outside of my party lines or voting independent because I'm reclaiming my vote. All right? And if you want to hear that song, you can catch the replay. All right. Part 2, relationships. So we've been talking about 2 things in regards to relationship. This is the book by Gary Chapman, Things I Wish I Knew Before We Got Married. And we started talking about the fact that you are marrying into a family. And when you marry into a family, there are expectations for you. Now, some of you are already married, and that's okay, because some of these things are probably going to resonate with you, and hopefully it will help you to improve your relations with your family, especially as another holiday is coming up. All right. So we talked about here that unless you have spent a great deal of time with your in-laws before marriage, you may be blindsided by certain expectations that they have for you. For example, we talked about holiday traditions, how your spouse or your future spouse may be in a family where they have certain traditions that they keep. That's something that you need to be asking. If, you know, every 4th of July, all of the family gets together, or in this example, all of the cousins get together and they go off all day and they go fishing, and that's the only time that the cousins of your family or whatever have to bond. That's a really important tradition to you. That's something you need to be discussing with your future spouse. You don't need to wait until you get married to start talking about these things. All right? You don't want to wait. So one of the things he says here is about religious overtones we talked about last time. That because one side of the family was Jewish and the other spouse was Christian, the Jewish side of the family expected the husband to go to synagogue with them, but there was not really an expectation for the family to go to church with them. And so it goes back to, are these fair expectations? If you're expecting one side of the family to do something, are you willing to do it on the other or the opposite side? Now she says here, Megan had been married only 5 months when she said in the counseling office, "My mother-in-law is the most organized woman I know. You should see her closets. Every shoe is in the right place and all of her dresses are color coordinated. The problem is I'm not very organized, and when she comes to our apartment, she tries to give me suggestions that she thinks will make my life easier. I'm sorry, but that's just not who I am. Besides that, I don't have time to keep everything organized. Your in-laws may also have strongly held religious beliefs that differ from yours. One young husband said, every time I'm around her father, it's like he's trying to convert me to his brand of Christianity. I am a believer, but I'm not as dogmatic and pushy as he is. I think religion is a personal matter, and I resent him trying to pressure me to agree with him all the time." Suzanne, who grew up in a Lutheran home, said, "My husband's folks are Baptists and constantly talk about my getting baptized. I was baptized as a child and I don't feel any need to be re-baptized. They act like it is a big deal. I don't get it." Learning to listen. In these and numerous other areas, you will discover that your in-laws are individuals who have unique thoughts, feelings, and desires. They may differ from your own thoughts, feelings, and desires. So how do you build a positive relationship with your in-laws? I want to suggest that the process begins by learning to listen emphatically. By empathetic listening, I mean listening with a view to understanding what your in-laws think and how they came to that conclusion and how strongly they feel about it. By nature, most of us are not good listeners. We often listen long enough to give a rebuttal, and we end up in a needless argument. Empathetic listening holds judgment until you are certain that you understand what the other person is saying. This involves asking clarifying questions such as, "What I understand you to be saying, is that correct?" Or, "It sounds like you're asking me to do X, Y, and Z. Is that what you want?" Once you have listened long enough to clearly understand what they're saying and how strongly they feel about it, Then you are free to give your perspective on the subject. Because you have listened to them without condemnation, they are far more likely to hear your honest perspective. Empathetic listening does not require you to agree with the other person's ideas. Unfortunately, in 2017, people feel like if you don't agree with them, you're at war with them, and it's simply not true. You don't have to agree with another person's ideas to practice empathetic listening. It does require you to treat them and their ideas with respect. If you respect their ideas and speak to them with kindness, they are far more likely to respect your ideas and treat you kindly. Mutual understanding and mutual respect grows out of empathetic listening. When communicating with in-laws, always speak for yourself. Instead of saying, "You hurt my feelings when you said that," you might say, "I felt hurt when I heard you say that." When you start your sentences with "I," you are giving your perspective. But when you give your sentence with a "you," or you start it with "you," you're placing the blame, and it sounds accusatory and will likely experience a defensive response from your in-laws. The husband who says, "I feel frustrated when Kimberly tells me that every time you talk, you mention your husband's problem with alcohol and verbal abuse. I'm wondering if you want us to do something, and if so, what do you think we could do?" would likely open the door to meaningful communication. Learning to negotiate. The third ingredient to having good relationships with your in-laws is learning to negotiate differences. Negotiation begins by someone making a proposal. Jeremy said to his wife's parents, "I know that you want us to be here for Christmas Day and celebrate with the family. My parents, of course, have the same desire. Because you are 500 miles apart, we know that we can't be at both places on the same day. So I'm wondering, can we alternate between Thanksgiving and Christmas? We could be with you guys this Christmas and my folks on Thanksgiving, and then the next year we can reverse the order. I'm trying to find something that will work for both families." Jeremy has made the proposal. Now his in-laws have the opportunity to either accept or modify, or to make a different proposal of their own. It is the process of listening and respecting each other's ideas that allows the process of negotiation to go forward. Eventually, you will reach a solution that everyone can agree with, and the relationship with your in-laws is strengthened. Now, there are times when you have difficult in-laws, or maybe one in-law is abusive, or maybe one in-law is absent or not present in that person's life. Then you're dealing with a different set of circumstances, but you can still be kind about whatever the circumstance is. All right? There's nothing worse than having a spouse that berates your in-laws. No matter how imperfect they may be, they're still your parents. Can I get an amen? And so, let me just say this for people who are dating, seriously dating and courting. If someone is constantly complaining about your family and your in-laws, just ask yourself the question, am I going to want to hear this for the rest of my life? That's all I'm saying. If your potential spouse, every time y'all talk about your family, they have a complaint, just ask yourself, am I wanting to live and spend the rest of my life with somebody who's going to be complaining about my family? Or am I going to want to spend my life with someone who enjoys being around my family? Period. Because if you love your family and the person you're with doesn't, that already tells you that there's going to be a possibility that you all are going to spend some time arguing and in conflict about how much time you spend with your family. This is not rocket science. All right? Let's keep reading. Differences regarding holidays, traditions, expectations, patterns of behavior, and religion all call for negotiation. The ancient Hebrew scriptures observed how good and pleasant it is when brothers live together in unity. Unity requires negotiation. Negotiation is enhanced when you make requests and not demands. Tim said to his parents, "We really enjoy you guys coming over and we want to spend time with you, though I would like to make a request. Instead of just stopping by, would it be possible for you to call and see if it's a good evening for us? The reason I ask is that last week when you stopped by, I ended up staying up until midnight trying to get my work done for the next day. Friday night would have been a much better night for me. Does that make sense? And is it possible?" Tim has made a proposal again and a request. His parents may agree, they may show resistance, or they may make an alternative proposal, such as agreeing upon a particular night that they will normally come unless there's a specific reason to move it to another night. At any rate, by making a request and not a demand, Tim has kept the relationship positive. And that is always, hopefully, the goal is that you want positive, healthy relationships with your in-laws. Lastly, learning their love language. My final suggestion for maintaining good and positive in-law relationships is to learn the primary love language of your in-laws and speak that language regularly. When your in-laws feel genuinely loved, it creates a positive climate in which to negotiate differences. Nothing communicates love more deeply than speaking the right love language. Once you have read the book, The 5 Love Languages, which a lot of people have read, but if you haven't, I suggest that you read it. Once they read the book and understand the concepts, you may want to discuss what their primary love languages are. So that can even be a good family activity. A lot of people have Facebook groups now for their family, so you could actually go over the love languages in your family Facebook group. Or everybody can get the book and read it, and then the next time that you all meet for a family gathering, y'all can talk about what is your love language and have we been communicating in it. Some people's love language is acts of kindness, right? Some people's love language is words of affirmation. Those are 2 of them inside of the book. So sometimes people find out that usually they're communicating with people in a love language that is their own. And sometimes your love language doesn't match the person that you're with. All right? The person that you're with, love language might be acts of kindness, and yours might be words of affirmation. So you think that complimenting them all the time and saying how much you love them is working for them, and it's not, because they are more of a show me that you love me kind of person. So you have to make sure that you're communicating with people how they desire to be shown affection. Neither Carolyn nor I, the author writes, experienced a great deal of trauma in relating to our extended families. The first 2 years of our marriage, we lived 2,000 miles away from both of our families. Christmas was our only time at home, and both families lived in the same town, so it was easy. My family celebrated on Christmas Eve and hers on Christmas Day. Therefore, in-law relationships were distant but positive. Carolyn's father was deceased before we got married. When I finished graduate studies and we moved closer to our families, her mother was my chief cheerleader. Her love language was acts of service. After I painted the house for her, I could do no wrong. My parents were helpful, positive, and never overbearing. I certainly would not have been prepared to deal with in-law conflicts. Carolyn and I had never discussed the subject. I realize now how naive we were. Hundreds of couples who have walked through my counseling office have made me realize that we were the exception. Having good in-law relationships normally requires time and effort. All right. So our last reading for today, I said, was we were going to pick back up with Tony Evans' Kingdom Marriage. Remember, on Mondays, we are reading from the series Kingdom Disciples. So we were talking about the kingdom husband. And remember, we said that the origin of the word husband comes from 2 words, and that is house band, or one who bands the house together. And I know that everybody thinks it's the woman who bands the house together, but if you do a little digging in scripture, you will find out it's actually the man. So let's continue reading what Tony Evans has to say. Just as the husband nourishes and cherishes his own body in order to satisfy its needs, he should also seek to satisfy the needs of his wife. He nourishes and cherishes her so that 10, 20, or 30 years down the line, the wife can say confidently, I'm satisfied with my life, my purpose, and my marriage. Now, most men don't want to hear about crosses and sacrifice. Instead, we want to hear about how we're supposed to be wearing a crown as the king of our castles and ruling it. Jesus wore an earthly crown before he ever wore a crown in heaven. All right? But it was a crown of thorns. Husband, you won't get the crown of glory without wearing the crown of the cross. So although most men want to talk about all the good stuff that comes with love, the first thing God wants to know about you as a husband is this. When your wife looks at you, does she see a cross? Are you demonstrating God's love vertically by living with her as a horizontal representation of Christ? We men are great at saying the right things. We can sound very impressive to our wives when we want to, talking about how we will be there for them and protect them and even die for them if necessary. But we're not crazy. We know that the chances of this happening are somewhat remote. I personally can't think of one man I know who has died or been injured defending his wife from a crazed intruder, and chances are you can't either. That's not necessarily going to happen to most of us or to anyone we know. But for most of us, it's another story when it comes to everyday sacrifices of married life. Surrendering or yielding our desires, opinions, preferences, and plans for our wives. When God calls husbands to give themselves up for their wives, he is not simply talking about being willing to die. Sacrificing for our wives and loving them involves being willing to nail our desires and agendas to the cross to meet their needs. This brings us to the area where we fail so often as husbands, the area of selfishness. It's difficult for most men to give up our wants for our wives. Yet a husband should let his love be visible and tangible so that his wife can experience how much he values her. Anyone who knows me knows that I am a man's man. I love being a man. Everything thrills me at the idea and reality of manhood. But without fail, when my wife hands me her bag to hold while she's shopping, I call it a bag, men. That helps. I grab it. Yes, I'm that guy, the one holding her purse. Do I like it? Does it make me look manly? No, not according to the world's definition. Do I love my wife? Yes, and this one small way I visibly demonstrate that love to her. The question of a husband's sacrifice is very simple. If I gave your wife a piece of paper and asked her to list what you have given up because of what she needs, desires, or cherishes, how long would her list be? Would she say that you gave up money or time? What would she say that you were willing to give up to show that you cherished her? If I asked her to tell me in what ways you've altered your schedule or activities so that she can do something she wants or needs to do, would she have anything to tell me? If the answer is no, that's the first place you need to start making some changes in your marriage. I work a lot and I enjoy it. Not only have I pastored a church for nearly 40 years, but we also have a national ministry and I speak frequently. Yet I always make room in my week for my wife, and so should you. One day each week is dedicated entirely to her. I put my phone away for the most part. I tackle my honey-do list, and we enjoy eating together, talking and shopping, and whatever the case may be. Too many men these days sacrifice their relationship with their wives because of their careers or hobbies, but that is not fulfilling their role in marriage. I encourage you to start by seeking to intentionally understand your wife and what she needs from you, but is not receiving. Then, try to meet as many of those needs as reasonably possible. If you have walled off communication in your marriage to such an extent that you don't even know what your wife wants or needs, and she's too timid to say anything, you need to go to her right now and ask. You just might be surprised by what she says, but you won't know until you ask. You may be working on an area that you think will satisfy your wife, but are missing the mark altogether. A good friend of mine recently asked his wife what one thing he could do to improve their relationship. He assumed she would say something like spend more time with the children or grow more spiritually. Do you know what she said? Stop biting your nails. My friend laughed as he told me that he's had a habit of biting his nails their entire marriage. Apparently this really annoyed her, but she rarely said anything. Knowing that this is what his wife wanted most from him gave him not only the ability, but also the desire to put that bad habit to rest. So go ahead and ask. It'll take the guesswork out of the mystery of loving well. The point is that our love should be visible as well as verbal. And I'm going to stop there for today. But while I stop there, I am going to praise my pond. So, my husband is on here this morning. I want to say thank you so very much for covering me, for protecting me, for loving me, for shielding me, for giving me foot massages, for going out and getting me coffee when I don't feel like going to get coffee, for just praying for me, for laying hands on me, for covering me, for speaking the word to me. Listen. For cooking me breakfast on the weekends, even when I'm half asleep and I don't want to get up and eat the breakfast, you still cook it. So I want to say thank you. I want to say that it's been 17 years and you have not stopped loving me like we first got married. And I don't know a whole lot of women who have that testimony. So I'm going to praise God. And if I had an organ, I would cue it right there. Right? So I want to thank God for you as my husband. And I pray that I continue to be the crown on your head that you can be proud of. So that is my concluding statement for today. I want to say thank you to all of you who have participated in today's broadcast. I'm not trying to make you cry. But I love you. I do love you. So, yeah, we're done for today. I want to thank you for your time and attention. And when we come back to this next week, we're going to talk about knowing, honoring, and praying for your wife. And then we're going to move into the role of the kingdom wife. And one of the things that I love about Tony Evans' work is that he always provides a balanced message. He's not one who speaks to one and doesn't call for accountability on the other side. So next week, we're going to finish up the kingdom husband piece, the role of the kingdom husband, and then we're going to begin talking about the role of the kingdom wife. All right, so this has been another episode of Daring Dialogues, where I am your host, Shantae Charles. We will be back tomorrow with Thinking Thursday, Theology Thursday. We're going to continue starting with world views. All right, so I hope that I have said something helpful today. If you're thinking about voting, you need to begin looking at candidates, seeing who is in the running in your area. People by this point are going to start campaigning. You're going to start seeing flyers in the mail because people are gearing up for those races that are coming in 2018. Remember, there are lots of seats in the House that are going to be open for election in 2018. So start thinking about who you want to vote for. If you get those notices in the mail where candidates are starting to talk about their platform, call their campaign offices and, hey, ask them if you have the space to do it. Tell them, I want to set up a town hall. I want to set up a community meeting. I want you to invite you in. Tell us about your platform. Let us ask you some questions. All right. Those are things that you can do, and you don't have to have some official person doing it. Okay, as a citizen, that is your right to be able to call for the elected officials who want to hold positions that is going to affect your community. It is your right to call them out, to say, hey, we want to have a talk. Our community wants to meet with you. Let's hear your platform, and let's see if you're somebody that we want to get behind. That is something that anybody can do. All right? So remember, light is the most daring opposition to darkness. So please go out and be light today. If you have not, perchance, listened to last night's broadcast, you can watch it here on a replay. And I hope that you will have a great and wonderful Wednesday. I want you to win always, always, always. And lastly, thank you for tuning in. Take care, and God bless. And again, thank you, our YouTube viewers, again for tuning in. Here is our information by which you can reach us. All right. It's got all of the information there. You can reach our office. You can mail things to us. You can reach us on Facebook at Life Nation, and on Twitter at Next Gen Leaders. That's a 3 in the next, at Next Gen Leaders on Twitter. Thank you so much for your time and attention. Take care, and God bless.